President Barry Jagdeo says government will pursue greater integration of the drainage system on the east coast of Demerara to minimize the effects of heavy rainfall.
And the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority has begun the public tendering process of invitation bids for the design.
And the People's National Congress has walked out of the National Assembly threatening legal action as the Trade Union Recognition Amendment Bill was read second time.
For details of these and other stories, the Diamond Mineral Water and NTN Sports News and more in tonight's news. Good evening, I'm Delicia Fletcher.
And I'm Paul Moore.
First, this edition of the 6 o'clock news for today, Thursday, January 8, 2009. Here's what's happening. Paul.
Thanks, Delicia. President Barry Jagdeo says there is need for greater integration of the drainage system on the east coast of Demerara to minimize the effects of heavy rainfall. To this end, he has disclosed that the proposed outlet of Hope has been made a priority and should be completed by the first half of next year. More in this report.
Over the past year, government has spent some $1.7 billion to intensify drainage and irrigation works around the country. However, President Barry Jagdeo says a more integrated drainage system is needed to prevent major accumulation in low-lying communities on the east coast of Demerara.
What happens is that the villages are not all at the same level. You have some villages that are lower than others. So because the drainage system is not integrated, often it's standalone, you may have water accumulating in low villages as soon as the rain falls, and the neighboring village could be dry, but because the system is not integrated, you don't have a more rapid outflow of water.
The President says persons also need to observe the building code, either building on stilts or making the foundation high in the case of flat houses. Contrary to some reports, the head of state says there is no deliberate attempt to flood areas, but rather to prevent the dam from breaking and causing catastrophic implications.
We have this unusual situation where we wait until the water accumulates right up to the edge of the dam before we start blowing, hoping that you would have an abatement in the rainfall and that then you would be able to run down the conservancy by blowing more water into the Demerara River. This is untenable because you're just waiting for fortune, and unfortunately fortune has not favored us because the rains keep falling, especially deep in the backlands.
As such, the Guyanese leader says money will be allocated in this year's budget to build the proposed $3 billion drainage outlet at Hope to prevent reoccurrences of this situation. A feasibility study and design are expected to be completed within the next 6 months, upon which construction will commence and should finish by next June. The head of state says a foreign firm is likely to be contracted for the job. Reporting for the 6 o'clock news, I'm Charlotte Lau.
And President Barry Jagdeo is still not satisfied with public relations efforts by the Guyana Police Force to effectively promote the campaign against drinking and driving. The President, during a press conference yesterday, described the PR campaign as meager and lacking adequacy and has called more emphasis on the public's education of the law. Edward Lane reports.
Last year, President Barry Jagdeo was reluctant to assent to the Evidence on Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Bill, which is aimed at monitoring the alcohol levels in drivers, as he cited the need for a thorough public awareness campaign. He, however, signed the legislation late in the year, after which the police launched a public awareness program on the law.
There's a new law that says if you drink, get in the car and drive, and we catch you, you're going to get into a lot of trouble and could end up in jail. It's simple: don't drink and don't drive.
But the President at a media conference Wednesday said enough is not being done in educating the public on elements of the legislation which will significantly reduce road carnage.
The PR has been meager and not adequate so far, because you need to tell people, give them a lot of information. What is the tolerable limit of drinking, how it will be measured, what the enforcement form will take. They need to know the consequences of the legislation, loss of licenses, etc.
Mr. Jagdeo, while calling on the media to assist with the campaign, stressed that more can and needs to be done if the law is to be effective.
So I still urge them to step up the PR and anything that the media can do to reflect more on the legislation and to speak about the consequences so that the public at large, the driving public, would understand the provisions of that law. We would appreciate this.
The Evidence on Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2008 was passed in July last year, placing restrictions on the amount of alcohol a driver is allowed to consume while driving. The limit is a breath alcohol concentration of 35 micrograms of alcohol in 100 milliliters of breath and blood alcohol concentration of 80 milligrams in 100 milliliters of blood, the equivalent of 2 bottles of beer. The Act provides for a certificate signed by a registered medical practitioner to be received in a court as evidence in relation to analysis of breath or blood tests. The breathalyzer test is compulsory for suspected drivers and if found guilty on 3 occasions will be banned for driving legally in Guyana. Edward Lane, the 6 o'clock news.
The report on the Customs Officer's fraud is completed and will be made public shortly. The investigation was launched in light of possible defrauding of government revenues by customs officers and the company Fidelity Investments. President Barry Jagdeo says the report will be tabled in the National Assembly, at which point it will be made public. The President had asked the Audit Office to look into the accumulation of assets of some customs officers, but this was not done, noting this would make a difference. The head of state says there will be dire consequences for those who are involved in this issue. The National Drainage and Irrigation Authority has begun the public process of invitation bids for the design. Here's more.
Minister of Agriculture Robert Bissard anticipates that once the technical preparation and public procurement activities are conducted, work can start in this regard. This project, however, forms part of the National Adaptation Strategy and the National Drainage and Irrigation Plan.
We do hope that close to $2 billion will be allocated in the 2009 budget to commence this project, and the remaining sum will be put in the 2010 budget. We hope that this project can start by mid-year, but the resources are there.
Meanwhile, a U.S. $3.8 million conservancy adaptation project is currently underway with support from the Global Environment Facility and the World Bank. The project will undertake specific upgrading works and operational improvements aimed at enhancing the flood capacity of the East Demerara Water Conservancy. In the meantime, the ministry and its team is still trying assiduously to see various ways to get the accumulated water off affected lands at a faster rate.
Those who get water accumulated first will be the last to see it drain out because of the topography and the low-lying areas, and those are some of the realities we have to deal with. And since that we are still in the height of the rainy season, I want to continue to urge residents and farmers to be on the alert, not to take anything for granted.
Ernestine Tagmarine reporting for the NCN 6 O'clock News.